What's up? What's happening on a Thursday on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980? I am Craig Hoffman, joined by, of course, super producer Anthony Haney. Haney, how are you on this Thursday?
I'm a little sad.
Why are you? Well, now you're sad because your headphones are busted.
Yeah, I'm a little sad because this is gonna be our last show for a while.
It is going to be our last show for a while. I am taking some much-needed time off next week. That actually kind of starts tomorrow because we're going to see my niece and my in-laws in Ohio. So I'm excited for that. But it does mean that I'm off tomorrow. Doc is in, so the audience, you're in very good hands. Just Anthony and I are going to miss each other a little bit. Are you going to text me in the morning and just be like, hey, what do you want to talk about today? And I'm going to be like, whatever you want, buddy, because it doesn't have to be the radio.
I think I'll probably get myself together where I'm about to text you and then think, Craig is out, actually.
Right. You're going to let me enjoy some time not thinking about football topics.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That's true friendship.
If you would like to, come on the show at any time during your break, let me know.
Buy you a segment?
Yes.
Who knows? I mean, a week off is a long time. Now, I think we're still gonna do take command. So, like, we'll scratch the itch a little bit. We could always send you a take command segment. Then I don't have to do it twice.
That's fair.
And I'm sure Doc would take the segment and be like, he loves Logan, his fellow Bruin.
Yep.
Anthony, I could be in trouble here. I just got a piece of the protein bar I just ate, which this feels like a very Hoffman thing to happen. It just got lodged in my throat. I don't have water upstairs. I'm in the home studio today, and I am 2 flights away from water. Anthony can't help me. Rachel just left, so she's probably now listening to the show driving, being like, you big giant dummy. I would help you if I was home. There's nothing I can do. I think I cleared it. I think we're okay.
There we go.
Also, in case anyone's wondering, I don't have a cough button at home, so I can't get fined. I tried my best to at least lean away from the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we are. Just off to a raucous start here on my Friday, but the Thursday edition of the Hoffman Show. Obviously, our main story today is going to be the press conferences that happened an hour and a half ago in Ashburn. Joe Whitt Jr. burned down the building. Everybody's ready to run through a wall. Everyone's super psyched. And Kliff Kingsbury is very, very efficient in his speech, Anthony. I feel like we have now switched places. Last year, it was the offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, who we were like, long sound bites, get ready. Although I feel like Joe Whitt Jr. is a lot more substantive. EB was a lot of platitudes. But Joe Whitt Jr., he'll give you an answer, and Kliff is just like, bang, 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 done. And it's not like he doesn't answer the question, unless he's like intentionally not answering the question. But he is. It's actually something that I remember talking about with Logan that he had heard, and that kind of the way Kliff operates, and even Kliff talked about this on the podcast that I've mentioned a couple of times, the interview or the podcast he did with Peter Schrager and Sean McVay back in 2021 or 2020 during the pandemic, when Sean decided he was going to do a podcast for like 7 episodes. And it talks about like how Kliff is a very efficient on purpose with how he delivers stuff to players, because he knows that attention spans just aren't that long. And it's like, here is what you need to know. Okay? Get out of here. And I think players probably love and respect that about him, where definitely we've all been in meetings where they can drown on. I actually saw a clip earlier today from the Let's Go podcast, which is Tom Brady's podcast, where it's him, Julian Edelman, and Randy Moss talking about some days back in New England when Randy would like beg the coaches to not have meetings. Like, Randy Moss did not like meetings. Randy Moss threatened to retire weekly over meetings. He's just like, no, I don't want it. And apparently there was one time, we actually should pull this for real things, Anthony. It's on the Let's Go podcast Instagram page. But Randy would, he'd get the receivers together and be like, we're getting this right. And it's because he had gone to Bill O'Brien, who's the offensive coordinator, and been like, I got it. We're going to handle it. We don't need to meet about this, because Randy didn't want to have a meeting. So it was a form of accountability to get Randy Moss out of meetings that Randy Moss was a leader in New England in that very specific way. But Kliff, very short and to the point. And I think I want to talk about both these guys to start, and then I have kind of some, I think, deeper, more interesting thoughts on some of the things specifically that Kliff said next. But I came away impressed with both for different reasons. I think that when you listen to Joe Whitt Jr., the thing that you immediately get and gather is that he understands teaching, and that is ultimately the job. The job is to understand who you are talking to and how to get them information. And I thought he shared a personal but very important anecdote or factoid. Like, he's dyslexic, so he is used to being kind of screwed by the way that we educate. And it's not that this is a dumb person by any stretch. Listen to him for 5 seconds. You're like, that is a smart man who has his stuff together. He's got a lot of energy. He's fired up, but like, there's an intelligence that just comes streaming out of him in terms of understanding of what the job is and a passion to ultimately get it done. But when you have a learning disability and the system doesn't really account for that, by the system, I mean, like, public academia or most academia, especially in the times that Joe Whitt was coming up. I mean, this is not someone who is coming up in the modern school system that is better equipped in these ways, or better school systems that are equipped in these ways. We know more now. We have better ways to equip teachers, and we're more sensitive. And I use sensitive as a positive word. We're more sensitive to these things now because we realize how much potential has been lost by looking past people who couldn't learn because of things beyond their control. But because he has gone through this and experienced life this way, the word he used, he's like, I'm used to teaching to the creative learner. So he has different ways that he can get his points across to people. And he talked about how if a player can't learn from a coach, that's a coaching problem, not a player problem. So that's just not going to fly in the ways that it felt like guys like Jamin Davis and Emmanuel Forbes and every other young player that seemed to go through the defense over the last couple of years by one coach or another would get left behind. And you have the same mistakes over and over again. And you're just going, you can't develop players this way. And I think Joe Whitt Jr. understands that. And I don't know whether they would use those terms like player development versus just like, no, that's coaching, but it's one and the same. And ultimately, that's what's really important. I think when you talk about what Kliff brings is clearly a high level of thought about offensive football. And I think he also is someone on the communications front that is extremely on message. A couple of reporters, and I don't say this again, like it's Nikki and Sam, who I think did a great job and asked the right questions, but they tried to get a little bit more information out of him about the process in terms of coming here. And Kliff very clearly had a plan that he was not going to talk about that. And instead of what happens a lot of times, which is you have an ability to peel back the layers if you are diligent as a reporter and ask questions and follow up, and you sense a little bit of an opening here, a little bit of an opening there, and you can finally get some information. Kliff just shut it down. Kliff was like, I don't really want to talk about the process. I'm really excited to be here. The fan base, the ownership group, blah, blah, blah. He answered the rest of the question. Follow up, can you do that? I really don't want to talk about the process. Period. He just stopped talking. Sam follows up, asks, hey, how's Magic Johnson involved? And Kliff chuckled. He's like, I don't want to talk about it. And then he just stops talking. Like, that is a person who understands what he wants, who he's comfortable saying, understands what he's not, and is extremely and poignantly on message. That is an effective communicator. And ultimately, obviously, it's got to get through the players. Ultimately, he's going to have to be able to do that as a teacher and as a coach. But seeing those skills, I immediately see some of the reasons why Dan Quinn was attracted to these men and in terms of bringing them in as a coach and why he trusts them to lead, because the coordinator position is not just like, can you coach offense or defense? You are coaching over an entire staff, and you got to understand how to put it all together and how to get everybody to work together. And I think maybe some of the ways they go about it are different, but also there's some underlying important similarities in terms of effective communication that come across from both men in their press conference today. However, I think the most interesting thing that comes out of this press conference today is the way Kliff Kingsbury described what the Commanders are going to do on offense. And I think not to ruin the whole next segment, but I don't think Kliff Kingsbury knows what the Commanders are going to do on offense, which could be amazing and is also slightly terrifying. I'll explain next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, just over 15 minutes from right now, ESPN's Field Yates dropped his mock draft 1.0 yesterday. He joins the show, and then if you haven't heard Take Command's mock draft 1.0, you'll hear the first part of it coming up at the top of the hour. So great little draft bit coming up. Also, in between those two, thoughts on the top three quarterbacks and how they could fit with Kliff Kingsbury's offense, which brings us to Kliff Kingsbury's offense. Kliff Kingsbury obviously played for Mike Leach at Texas Tech, air raid guy in terms of how he came up. He then took that offense that he played very well in as a quarterback at Texas Tech. Didn't really play a lot in the NFL. Did get a Super Bowl ring as a Tom Brady backup in New England, but retires, goes into coaching, goes to the University of Houston where he pairs up with a guy named Kevin Sumlin. Very quickly, he impresses Sumlin. Case Keenum, who somehow is still playing in the NFL. Not somehow like as in, congrats to Case. Like, he's been around a while. Like, congrats. That wasn't meant to be a shot. It kind of sounded like it. Anyway, point is, Case Keenum was his quarterback back in the day at University of Houston, and they broke records. Like, Case was throwing like 50 touchdowns. It was nuts. And then Sumlin goes to Texas A&M. Kliff goes with him. Kliff's the OC by this point. Had great success with Johnny Manziel, obviously. Then he gets the job at Texas Tech, has Mahomes, yada, yada. And he's kind of running air raid the whole time. Now, as he got to Arizona and got his first shot in the NFL, we saw what I would not consider a true air raid offense. Certainly a lot of air raid principles, but there was a lot more to it at the NFL level. So that leaves this huge question now as Kliff Kingsbury gets his second shot in the NFL, this time as just an offensive coordinator, not as a head coach. And he brings in Anthony Lynn. He brings in Bobby Johnson. He brings in Brian Johnson and multiple other coaches that have other backgrounds. Keeps Tavita Pritchard. David Blau is now the assistant quarterbacks coach who played for Kliff briefly in Arizona and really impressed him. One of the smartest guys in the NFL in terms of a backup quarterback. Feel big Dan Orlovsky vibes. Like played a long time, even though he didn't actually play because he wasn't that good as a player, but like brilliant and worth having in a meeting room. And so now the Commanders are going to pay him to be in the meeting room as a coach instead of as a quarterback. But you have all these different backgrounds, and how does it all come together? And Kliff said something today directly about the roots of it all, the air raid, that I think is significant and fascinating. Here is what the Commanders' new offensive coordinator said.
Yeah, at Texas Tech, University of Houston, we had Case Keenum and Patrick Mahomes, so we were throwing it a ton, and it was spread offense just like a lot of those are. You get to the NFL, you learn the nature of that game and the different personnel groups and the matchups and things like that, and I'm not sure where we were on pass percentage my last 3 years there, but I know it wasn't at the top. So we want to be balanced. We want to be able to run the football and play action pass and really do whatever it takes to win. But the air raid deal is I'm honored to be a part of that because it was Mike Leach, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, but I wouldn't categorize anything we do under that name.
R.I.P. to the Pirate. Salute. But to hear Kliff say that, considering how much reverence he does have and how easy it would frankly be to lie about it too, to be like, yeah, no, that's what we're doing, and then just not do it. I think it's pretty significant. And the air raid has a lot of interesting concepts. And I think actually the air raid, from what I know about it, has a very useful place structurally in the modern NFL. I'm going to get real nerdy on you here for a second, so hopefully I do a good job explaining. But we think of coverages, specifically zone coverages, of how they're drawn up in Madden, because that's most of our daily, non-professional football player exposure to them. There are kind of dots on the screen, shaded areas, and you're responsible for that. Or, if you want to go slightly more advanced, it's like, cover 3, for instance, a basic cover 3. You have the 2 corners that are responsible for a deep third of the field, so like 15 yards of depth and to the end zone. Divide the field in thirds, and the corners are responsible for the outside 2/3, and one of the safeties is responsible for the middle. Then take that 15 yards to the line of scrimmage and up, divide it into quarters, and that's your area. That's realistically not how zone coverages work in the NFL anymore. The Vic Fangio school has blended these zone match concepts that wind up being very amoeba-y in terms of their coverage. So, yes, a receiver might enter your area, and then you latch on and follow him. And how you match that could look very man-to-man-y, and thus the zone beaters that coaches have come up with for years, like, we need to, pull a defender out of one area. Double slants can pull a defender out of one area of the zone and then create a vacant hole behind, or that first slant is open because it's a different zone. Like a lot of these route combinations, that attack flat slant and then, whatever behind it, or mesh concepts. Like they all are designed to attack that more static version of zone coverage. And when you latch on, it messes it up because a guy that's supposed to run and break free all of a sudden, or have an area to sit down once he clears a linebacker over the middle, that's not there anymore because the linebacker just latched onto him. And what the air raid theoretically does is it reads space, not coverage. So we don't care whether you're in cover 2, cover 3, or some of these. Even, there was kind of a step in between of zone match and kind of your basic coverages of something like a cover 6, which looks like cover 3 on one side and cover 4 on the other. And so to have why it's then called cover 6, I couldn't tell you, but that's kind of how it goes. Again, I was told there would be no math. So the idea that you're reading space is actually very helpful. And to have that as part of your offense, I think could be very beneficial in the modern NFL. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of Matt Ryan, who, when he joined us last summer on Take Command, talked about how he started to do that more, where instead of, like, he would have games where he had big games and completions, and if you asked him afterwards what coverages the defense was playing, he wouldn't know. Because he'd be like, I don't know, we just decided we were going to put, because they were playing this amoeba coverage that we didn't really know what it was because it got so messy, we would know that we were attacking the safety. And based off where the safety went, I threw it where he wasn't. And so that is kind of, on some level, how the air raid works, at least my understanding of it, is it's this space reads. It's attacking players. It's putting them in conflict. And so taking that and combining it with other offenses seems like a great way to build an offense in the modern NFL. Let's take some of the zone running game stuff that Kyle Shanahan has done very well. Let's take some of the gap scheme running stuff that other teams have done very well, that Bobby Johnson is very familiar with and Anthony Lynn is very familiar with. Let's take all of that stuff, marry it with some of the pass game concepts, some of the protection rules, and some of the fakes and all these kinds of things with the air raid, route concepts, and now we're cooking with something. However, and some of that is already happening around the league, I would say. However, how you do that, how you go about building it is, I would say, both exciting, but also moderately terrifying because you have to build it from scratch. And so how do they go about building it? Kliff Kingsbury today on the personnel side of this, and where I think this gets, I would say, a fine line between exciting and terrifying.
Yeah, I haven't got, I would say, far enough into it, but obviously there's some explosive pieces on offense that you notice. But I'm about 3 games in, so we have a ways to go. But, yeah, I'm excited. I think there's some pieces there.
So what are we building here? Is it around Terry and John? Is it around Brian Robinson? Is it around whatever this quarterback is, which means we can't start building the quarterback or building the offense till the quarterback's here? Then what happens if that quarterback gets hurt? Like, they did have a little bit of that in Arizona, where they built the offense around Kyler, which, there is a little bit of what they used to say with the Indianapolis Colts, where I think it was Howard Mudd. It might have been one of the other assistants, but one of the old Peyton Manning coaches would say, like, what happens if Peyton gets hurt? And he goes, we're bleeped, and we don't plan for bleeped. It's just like, well, there is no Jim Sorgi offense. Like, we're screwed. And that's a little bit what happened to them in Arizona. Kyler goes out, and a lot of the offense that was built around Kyler doesn't work as well with Colt McCoy and David Blau and et cetera, obviously. So ultimately, I guess what I'm getting at is this. I think you have to have principles that you're building off of. And I trust that Kliff Kingsbury has been around the NFL long enough to have principles. There are going to be certain non-negotiables. But even in the way he talked about Anthony Lynn's role, where he said, like, oh, we're figuring it out. It doesn't seem like they have much of a plan beyond get smart people in the building and go from there. Which, again, is not the worst plan I've ever heard. It's a lot better than, hey, we have a bunch of people that are mediocre at their jobs and we have the track record to prove it. But if we just keep running it back because we all know each other, it'll go great. AKA the first 3 years of offensive coaching of the Ron Rivera era. So I trust that there are smart minds in the room. I trust that they have all bought in, that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and Kliff Kingsbury would not sign off on them if they weren't all on board with the idea that, hey, we're going to build something here. And taking the experiences from all of these coaches, I would say, and then taking also what you want to be as an offense and filling it out personnel-wise, seeing what you have, how do we accentuate the strengths? I think that plays into what I call my dude theory, which is like, let's get the good dudes the ball. So let's take what Brian Robinson does well, and let's make sure it's in the offense. Let's make sure we see what Terry and Jahan do well and make sure it's in the offense. I love that. But it does come with a level of concern that you are building it from scratch as opposed to saying, we know this stuff works. Here's how we're going to do it. we've tested, proven, found errors, etc. Building it all at once, making it all come together, and not really having, at least publicly, and I will also say, I they don't have to tell us everything, but I don't know why you'd say, like, yeah, we don't really know what run game coordinator means yet if you do. Not really having clear lines of who does what and what's responsibility is a little scary to me. Collaboration is great if it turns into true collaboration. And this is where DQ is huge. His force of personality and the way he runs a building has a massive, I would say, calming effect on my nerves as I give you this take. I trust that they can get it done. If I had to bet one way or the other, I would bet on it working. But I would not be doing my job in kind of giving you the whole picture if I did not say that some of the lack of clarity, some of the lack of concise, clear vision and responsibilities, etc., does it make me a little nervous. Ultimately, it's not my job to figure it out, but we'll see what the results are, and we'll certainly be talking about them all fall along here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, Field Yates joins us, ESPN NFL insider, gives his mock draft 1.0, who's he's got going to Washington, and then we'll talk about some of the top quarterbacks and how they could build an offense around them coming up at 4:45 here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And joining us now for the first time in a while, it's our pleasure to welcome back our good friend Field Yates to the show, ESPN NFL Insider. Field, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. We are rolling along in week one of after the Super Bowl is over. All kinds of news. It's draft season. Free agency is less than a month away. It is a great time to be a football fan.
It's so funny hearing you say it's like week one of the NFL offseason because, like, it is, but also, like, if you're a local team, you know, if you're a local person, you cover one team who's been out of it, it's like week 6 at this point of the offseason.
Totally.
But, like, it is kind of
100%.
this weird dynamic of, like, you know, if you're Kyle in San Francisco and you let go of Steve Wilkes, which that kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's like, well, everyone else has hired a D coordinator. And so also you feel terrible for Steve Wilkes because had he been available 6 weeks, what job he would have now. But that's kind of just how this all works. The reason that we have Field on, though, specifically is because he has released his mock draft 1.0. And Field, you have same thing you did on the podcast yesterday, mock draft 1.0 for us. And you went the same place we did, LSU for the Commanders. Why do you like this fit for Washington? And how realistic is it that Daniels has jumped Drake May in the eyes of many evaluators as you talk to people around the league, that this is going to happen potentially at 2, where I think all college football season we thought that it was going to go Caleb Williams and then Drake May?
Yeah, I think people need to remind themselves that a lot changes in the course of one college football season. And I also think people need to be aware of this. When the conversation surrounding the top quarterbacks continues over the next 2 months, it is not a 2-man race. It's a 3-man race. I'm just telling you that's absolutely, unequivocally how the league sees these 3 quarterbacks. This is not simply the Drake May versus Caleb Williams debate. Jaden Daniels is right in the thick of it as well. No player did more to help his draft stock this season than Jaden Daniels. Juan put an LSU team that was frankly bad on defense, had a limited offensive line, put him on his back, or I guess on his shoulder and his legs, because he had an unbelievable season as a dual threat quarterback. Threw for 40 touchdowns, ran for over 1,000 yards. The guy was lights out in big moments. He has all the clutch production that you could possibly ask for out of a player at this stage of his college football career. He is no doubt in the conversation for the best or second best quarterback in all of the 2024 NFL draft.
So actually, I'm glad you said that way at the end there, the best or second best. Like, how varied are, as you talk to more and more of, you know, NFL personnel types, which obviously those that don't know, Field has worked in an NFL front office before, even though he's been doing the media thing for a bunch of years now, maintains great contacts, has a great eye, all of these things. So as you look at it and as you talk to other folks around the league, like, how tight is this 3-man race, and how varied are they, not just 2 and 3, but 1 through 3 with May, Daniels, and Williams?
Yeah, I think if you did a straw poll of 32 GMs, you'd probably get the most votes for Caleb Williams. But I think you'd get a couple votes, a handful of votes perhaps for Jaden Daniels, and maybe a couple of others for Drake May as well. Listen, when you go back and watch this 2024 season, the player that played the best out of the 3 is Jaden Daniels. Caleb Williams had a bit of a step back relative too, but he also had one of the greatest college football seasons ever in 2022, so a step back was borderline inevitable. Drake May had a step back as well, but Drake May in 2022, there are 4 major awards that a freshman is eligible for in the ACC. Only twice has a freshman won all 4 of those awards. Jameis Winston back at Florida State and Drake May in 2022 in North Carolina. I'm talking about Rookie of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, and Player of the Year. He had a monster 2022 season. Like Caleb Williams, likely to take a step back. That being said, Drake had more moments, left you feeling a little bit less inspired this season relative to Caleb Williams, which is why the conversation around Caleb still being quarterback 1 is still very much in play. But I'm looking for picking nits is the word I was looking for right there as it pertains to these 3 quarterbacks, right? They're all tremendous. They all have a different style of play in which they operate. And if you land one of those 3 quarterbacks, you meaning the 3 teams in the top 3, I guarantee you there's enough talent in each of them to build a successful offense around going forward. We talk about quarterbacks that fail in the NFL. Sometimes teams fail quarterbacks. These three quarterbacks are all capable of being an architect for a long, long time in the NFL. But the job for Adam Peters, assuming that this team does not make a move up or down off the board, is having to between QB2 and QB3. If we assume that Caleb Williams winds up going number one, it's a fascinating decision that will reverberate for a long, long time in DC. Probably a decision that will reverberate for a long time in New England, as I suspect the Patriots will take the leftover of these three quarterbacks. High stakes, but there's a lot of upside for all three of these kids. I don't think this is a situation where you can truly go wrong.
Field Yates, ESPN NFL Insider with us. So, Field, I'm going to run my dream scenario by you as someone who knows the Patriots very well. My dream scenario for Washington is that
it's not happening.
What do you think?
I know where you're going. It's not happening.
What do you think?
The Patriots say we need to get up to pick 2, and we're going to give you, a boatload for.
Why
for
are you crushing
2.
my dreams, Field? Why is it? Why are you so adamant that it's not happening?
Scar tissue. The league is going to do that this year. We just saw the Panthers trade everything to get from 9 to 1. The jump is not as big from 3 to 2, but the leverage that Adam Peters would wield if he is talking to the Patriots at pick 2 is strong, right? The Patriots would only call you if they feel like, hey, if it's on the clock, it means that there's just one remaining that they like. If it's before the draft, it's all right. Hey, we know there are 2 that we like. We don't like quarterback 3, but that's incredibly unlikely to me. Think about the cost. I mean, for the Patriots, it's so prohibitive for a team that's got a bad roster. Like they can't 3 plus 36 plus like a first round pick next year to move up one slot. Simply can't do it. I get it. It's a dream for the Commanders. In the same way, by the way, it's probably a dream for the Bears that the Commanders offer everything to move up. And you'd probably say if the Commanders did that, no way, Jose. It's just not worth it. So I get it. But for the teams that are trying to move up, or trying to move back just to one spot, highly, highly unlikely.
Yeah, I guess my hope would be that, obviously, like, let's say the Commanders love Daniels, the Patriots love May, and the Falcons will get those two teams going against each other. And you basically tell New England, like, look, we're comfortable trading out. Like, we're willing to lose Daniels. Obviously, that would come with its own set of criticism, but, like, we're willing to trade back here. And so you either come get him or we're going to trade out. And that Robert Kraft gets desperate. But I guess you're saying that's
don't
unlikely.
plan on it.
Okay, I will.
It's much. Here's what's more likely.
Okay,
more likely is a team moving up from further back, Atlanta, because as an example, right? The reason why a team like Atlanta might do something like that is they may say, "Hey, we're a quarterback away," but if you're New England, it's completely miscalculating where your roster is at right now. Understanding that free agency has not taken place. If you think that you are just Drake May or Jaden Daniels away, you trade for the second pick, you draft that guy, and you're all square, even, Steven, no problem, right? You also will have diluted multiple premium assets in the process. I'm just going to be 3 to 2, like, hey, here's 3 and our 4th rounder for pick number 2. When it's a quarterback involved, it's going to be a match the Commanders would get. Meanwhile, if you're Atlanta and I don't believe that they are just a true blue Super Bowl contender in the. They have sort of different viewpoints of it, or they feel like, hey, we just hired this new coach. We want to go all in. The division's not very good. Let's capitalize on this window. They may be the kind of team, 8, next year's first, and something else to make it worth your while if you are the Commanders. But you have to ask yourself is that if we move all the way down to and Howell this year, and how does that impact how things are be on this season as well?
For sure. The other question, I guess, then in the equation is what do they think of Bo Nix? How high is Bo? This is a pretty good week.
Guys for Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. I'm not saying that those guys will be stacked up identically. For every team. And what factors this may or may not matter. In the case of Michael Penix, you're going to have to evaluate the way. Well, he's been healthy since he got to Washington. Totally. I'm the NFL team literally ever to come out of the draft. He started more games at any quarterback in college football history. Is a much different player than he was. Auburn, I got,
quarterback of both still though fit when by the way that they in Washington, Anthony Lynn, Brian Johnson and company.
Yeah, the idea of Jaden Daniels is really fun in DC because while it's not as simple as obviously protection was here, but two at wide receivers. I know Jahan Dotson took a step back this past season relative to what some of us thought he would become as a potential second-year breakout. But like, I would first of all, I would go find Terry McLaurin and like I would see how he's feeling because I'm sure he would be thrilled to have a quarterback of this caliber on the roster. Jaden Daniels completely changes the geometry of how you're able to play defense. It's a very simple but also difficult pickle that defensive coordinators face. You play man-to-man defense against a quarterback with the rushing ability of Jaden Daniels, and he breaks the pocket, and all your cornerbacks are manned up on wide receivers, and your safeties are manned up on tight ends and running backs, then you're probably going to give up a lot of space to a running quarterback who averaged over 8 yards per carry this past season. If you play zone, he's adept enough right now to pick you apart with his arm as well. This kid's a legit thrower, is Jaden Daniels. So the minute you draft Jaden Daniels, the minute he's in your huddle, he makes life easier on your offensive line, and he makes life way more difficult on the opposing defense.
Field Yates, ESPN NFL Insider. Catch him NFL Live and all of ESPN's vast NFL programming, and ESPN.com. You can check out full. Field, thank you for your time, sir. I'll see you in Indianapolis at the Combine.
Can't wait.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Take Command Mock Draft 1.0 coming up in about 10 minutes. An hour 10 from now, JP Finley joins us after he's done being a television star. He will bless us here on the lowly radio coming up at 6 o'clock. Radio's awesome. Who am I kidding? Anthony, why did I do that? Why am I being self-deprecating today? What are we doing?
I don't know. I wish I knew.
I feel like I have a little bit of the senioritis going. It's my last
okay.
show before time off. Just feeling a little loose.
You're really rubbing it in, man.
Sorry.
Because I'll be here tomorrow.
You will be.
Yes.
I literally keep forgetting that it's not Friday, which I realize now I'm just rubbing it in more. But that's how my brain is operating at this time. So I wanna run through the top 3 quarterbacks real quick. And I'm sure we'll do versions of this in more detail over the next couple of months. But we have 3 minutes here, 4 minutes before we get to Take Command Mock Draft 1.0. Also, by the way, our debut of our NBA tiers coming up at 5:30. All-Star break, good time to start it, especially as our NFL tiers disappear into the offseason. So we will rank all 30 NBA teams on the same 4 tiers that we did all the NFL teams coming up at 5:30. But 3 quarterbacks at the top of this draft. And I was wondering if Bo Nix could make this a top 4. I do think that chasm is going to be too wide. It is going to be these 3 guys off the board likely first. And then I do think there's still a little bit of a wild card I really think it's between Penix and McCarthy for QB4, which is weird because I also think McCarthy could be QB6 very easily. But I don't think Penix is going to jump into 4. Reason being, the opinions on McCarthy are going to be all over the place, in part because there's not a lot of film for him. Even though he's played a decent amount of football, they run the ball at Michigan way more than these other places. So there just aren't a lot of throws on tape for McCarthy and pass plays on tape to break down. And so with the smaller sample size, there's more room for variety. With that said, I do think there are elements of all 3 of the top quarterbacks' games that could fit in whatever Kliff Kingsbury builds based off of some of the stuff that he has done in the past. Kliff today was asked directly what he looks for in a quarterback, gave a funny answer, then gave a real one.
The Chiefs quarterback?
That'd help.
No. I do think the game, as you can see, you watch those guys, Brock and him at the end, when money's on the table, you got to be able to make some plays with your feet, move around enough to escape a bad play. And that doesn't mean you got to run like Lamar or Kyler Murray, but you better be able to move a little bit and buy yourself some time because the D-line, the rushes, the defense these days are so good. And then the intangibles, you want that player to be the hardest worker on your team. You want him to lead those guys each and every day when he shows up in the building. You want him to lift the building up, and that's why those guys make the type of money they do.
So the leadership elements are going to kind of be uncovered over the next couple of months. And this is an area where I think a guy like Nix, a guy like McCarthy, I think Penix is this way too. All those guys certainly could impress with their leadership capabilities. As Field told us in the last segment, Bo Nix has started more college games than anybody in the history of the sport between Auburn and Oregon. So there's great leadership there. And I do think that Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are all well respected within their programs and seen as good leaders with good intangibles as well. But the movement part, I think, is interesting because that is, if we're going to rank them 1, 2, 3, the best mover of the bunch is obviously Jaden Daniels as a runner. Caleb Williams is elite at avoiding stuff within the pocket and kind of moving around, keeping the eyes downfield, that kind of stuff. And I think that's a criticism of Jaden's game is, can he? I heard a scouting type say this the other day. Can he marry the pass game and the run game together, where he, when he takes off to run, keeps his eyes downfield and makes big plays with his arm, or is it drop back? He's good from the pocket, ball comes out on time, great, or he extends it a little bit, and then he's a runner. Can he have more of a hybrid between the two? And then you have Drake May, who is super mobile for sure, not as much of a runner as the other. Well, I would say as much as Daniels, not as good of a scrambler as Caleb, because who is? But they all have that big arm and the ability to make a playoff schedule, so that checks the box. Then I think you get to kind of the resume piece, and this is where it becomes pretty fascinating, and what Kliff Kingsbury said earlier today. This is not an air raid offense. Certainly we'll have some air raid concepts, but this is not like a pure air raid. And then look at like what Kliff did in Arizona, and he really attacked outside the numbers in a way that I think would benefit the current personnel of this team. If you can get a good running game going like they did with James Conner, that Washington would theoretically be doing with Brian Robinson, and then get the ball outside the numbers to DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, et cetera, that they had AJ Green there in Houston, or sorry, not in Houston, in Arizona, and then do that with Terry and Jahan and whoever else you bring in here. Like that's something that Jaden Daniels has a lot of experience with. He was a guy who threw a ton outside the numbers because he had 2 first-round picks at receiver, including Malik Neighbors, arguably the best receiver in the country. So that experience and that comfortability making long throws to the sideline and hitting a ton of go routes, the touch and the layering that he has, I think, even though people tie Kliff to Caleb Williams because of the USC tie and the RPO stuff that Kliff has run, and some of these other guys, by the way, that have been brought in have a ton of RPO experience that Caleb's great at. The air raid, Phil Longo's name came up in this press conference, the former offensive coordinator at North Carolina who gave Drake May a start, and they've kept that offense at North Carolina even after Longo has left. Like, these things are very obvious, but if you look at the traits that Kliff likes, I actually think Jaden Daniels is an excellent pick. So, needless to say, I think with the offense that they could build, you could push more of the air raid stuff, more of the RPO stuff, more of the quarterback run, whatever, based off which one you draft. But it does feel like all 3 of these would be good fits with Kliff Kingsbury and the staff that he's put together here in Washington. When we get back, we'll talk more about how this draft could go down, parse out some potential options at number 2 for Washington. It's Take Command Mock Draft 1.0, full first round. You'll hear it next here on The Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit here. But also, for people younger than me, I'm going to throw myself under the bus. So Anthony just played the French hour opener. And that spawned because in the break I said, I am le tired. And Anthony did not get the reference.
Nope.
So there's a famous early internet, like one of the first viral videos ever, was this like sketch, I guess it's a sketch comedy, by this company. I think it's called Albino Black Sheep, was the company, or the people. I don't know, whatever they were called, the outfit that produced it. But it was about like a nuclear war, which sounds way less funny when you say it out loud than it is, or than the video was. But it's just like the idea that like all these countries were going to start firing missiles at each other and a whole thing. And like the French were involved, and it's like, but I am tired. And it's like, okay, so take a nap. And then fires the missiles. And it's a whole thing. And now I'm going to require you, after we hit play on the Take Command Mock Draft 1.0, for you to go watch it. And then we'll discuss later in the show. So if you get the reference and you're like, Anthony, how could you not? But it also is like one of those situations where the age difference between us is enough that I'm actually not that surprised that you didn't know the reference. But I'm gonna teach you about the early internet days today, Ant.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm just here to edumacate the youth.
Thank you, old man.
I take that. I deserve that. I deserve that. All right. Mock Draft 1.0. I explain how we do it in the clip, so I don't need to over-explain. Logan, me, draft picks. Let's go. It is time for Mock Draft 1.0. Man, Logan, does it feel good to be back in the war room? If you're watching on YouTube, you got the draft in front of you.
It does, man. It's exciting, like, and again, like the draft is so funny. I had a coach tell me one time, and I didn't even think about this, but it's so much prep. It's 400 guys of prep for like 5 picks, and so like for just such a small thing. So
yeah, and you run a bunch of mock drafts if you're teams to try to do a bunch of different scenarios, and I will tell the listening audience I did a test run to make. Remember, Caleb Williams was on the board. Here's how we're gonna do this. We're gonna let the computer and I later on in the process will pick for everybody.
Yeah.
But for today, from pick 40, so we'll get the Commanders' first 3 picks. Washington, we're going to pick as ourselves. We're not trying to anticipate. I'm going to do it yet. Definitely be better than ours, but it is. We don't have and what we think of the players and all that kind of stuff. So when I hit play on the Bears took Drake May, and I was like, Caleb, I doubt that's we're about to find out. Any other disclaimers or things that we want people to know before we dive in?
And we'll go through a couple of picks as we go through the list that are surprising to us, of the sim, just to give some context. But yeah, computer's picking. So
yeah, so we'll definitely give some feedback. We are using PFF's mock draft simulator, which is obviously going to lean into their rankings. If we used another mock draft simulator, this might come out differently. That's all the background. 3, 2, 1. All right, in Caleb Williams, which leaves the top player. I know, stunning, especially after they didn't on the last one. So that leaves top players on PFF's board, from a positionless standpoint. Marvin Harrison, Drake May, Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze, Cooper, cornerback out of Iowa. On down the list, obviously Jaden Daniels is going to be someone that we're going to consider.
Yeah.
Diverse, the top 2 edge guys. But Logan, I think both in the camp right now that quarterback is the way to go. But let's play the game for a second. If you weren't going to go quarterback, would you do?
First thing I would do, right? If I could trade back out of this spot, I think that'd be excellent. Again, because you know, if you don't love one of the quarterbacks and someone else does, they're going to pay a lot to move up for that spot. And I look at
Right.
all these dynamic playmakers. You got your Marvin Harrison Juniors, your Malik Neighbors, your Joe Alts. Like Joe Alt and Marvin Harrison are really easy projections to NFL starters. So let's say you got one of those guys at 5, for example, right? And you got another pick in the first round, and you're able to draft another dynamic playmaker, you know, name your guy. Because I do think there is a lot of talent in the top 120 picks of this draft that you should feel good about. So if you could add picks there and add a pick next year, I think that's 100% the way to do it. But, you know, like, I think it's going to be really hard, honestly, to pass up on a quarterback at 2, especially because I think you're going to fall in love with one. I think the staff, I think teams around the league are going to fall in love with one of these guys because I'm in love. And I don't know how you feel, Craig, but I think we should probably take a quarterback. Or do you want to trade back?
I think so too. So my dream scenario, I was telling you about this the other night, and you were very excited about this. My dream scenario is that the quarterback that we don't fall in love with, or that Washington doesn't fall in love with, is the one New England falls in love with, and that someone else is also in love with that guy. So essentially what you can do is trade back one spot, because you can call New England and say, hey, you like Drake May, right? And they're like, yes. And it's like, okay, we want Daniels, but we are comfortable trading back to 5 or whatever else because we think we can get some of, and let's say it's 5 because that's the Giants, right? Or the Giants are at 6. So like, hey, we don't love our guy that much that we wouldn't trade out and go back to 6. So if you want Drake May, you got to make a trade with us in 3. But if you don't make the trade with us, we're going to trade back to 6 and the Giants are going to take your guy. Now you get to fleece New England out of something, move back one spot, still get your guy, and get an extra asset. That's the dream scenario. But you also can't. And you could get played by New England, and they could wind up stealing your guy from you. So I think that if you like one of these quarterbacks, you just don't mess around. You make the pick. And I think that's what I would do. I would also point out, just from an informational standpoint, if you draft, Arizona's the team you want to trade with, because they are sitting at 4. They have Houston's pick 27, and actually wonder, like, would this trade get accepted? 4 and 27 be accepted. So 4 and 27 for 2. That's very intriguing, especially if you're going to wind up at 4 getting Marvin Harrison Jr. or Joe Alt, or Arizona, that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get drafted by someone else. Like, that to me is the ultimate scenario. But I do think I would probably just draft a player. And I think that player is the same guy you want to draft.
Which is who? Who's your guy?
Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels is my guy too. You know, and again, we're still early and quarterbacks are hard to evaluate. And again, the difference between them is very small, but they're just, in that 2023 season, he was awesome. And again, he turns down open receivers to run the football. He's not a perfect prospect, but there's something about it, man. The ability to make plays when you need to make plays. There was something, you know, that reminds me of the playmakers at the position in the NFL. And I just thought, that's the guy. And it was a down year for Drake May. I acknowledge that. 2022, he looks awesome. But, you know, the recency bias is high for this, so I would probably go Jaden Daniels.
I would too. I look at the way, you know, you can't punish him for having open receivers, especially when all he does is put the ball in stride to the open receivers. Even if he doesn't have to make as many contested throws, he's going to have to make at the next level. He also doesn't throw the ball over the middle of the field as much. That was kind of the offense, but you do see him hit throughout some of the season, like some backside digs, and like those throws are there on his tape. They're just not as frequent because of the way the offense is called. The thing that you obviously need to figure out is, like, mentally, how is he going to operate in this offense? Right. It is a space read type of offense. It is not a pure progression type of offense, or a coverage reading kind of offense. So, like, how does his ability to read your offense match up with his skill set? That's the question. But from a physical tool standpoint, great arm strength, great accuracy, unbelievableness as a runner. Does need to learn how to not look like a cartoon character when he gets hit.
Yes.
But other than that, like, there's just a ton to like.
Yeah, a ton to like. And, you know, the middle of the field thing, I think, is 100% valid, you know, because I think that's one thing Drake May does really well. But I do think he's accurate, and he's not afraid to be aggressive with the football. And again, he's thrown to some really good receivers, but I like the aggressiveness that he showed, right? He's not all the time, but I like the tight window that seems to translate better to the NFL level. And again, the draft's a crapshoot, but if I had to pick today, which is what today's February, whatever,
it's February 14th. Don't tell your wife that you don't know what today is.
Today, I'm picking Jaden Daniels, but I do reserve the right to change my perspective on this as we get closer to the draft.
For sure. And the last thing I would say about Jaden in the air raid, and specifically Kliff, think about what he did in Arizona. It's like, let's get Hollywood Brown. Let's get DeAndre Hopkins. Like, I want to push the ball outside to my receivers. That is how he ran that offense. It wasn't an offense that ran a ton over the middle of the field. So when people draw the RPO connection and the personal connection to Caleb, the air raid connection to Drake, I'm like, I don't know. You want a guy who pushes it down the field on the outside the hashes? Jaden Daniels, bam, that's your guy.
Pulling clips for the show, one of the things that came out to me was like, or I don't know if this was a Kliff thing or if this was a Kyler thing. Anytime on the backside of 3x1, they're running goes. They're not running backside digs. They're running goes or comebacks. And they got so many explosive plays because, like, on the backside of 3x1, even if it's cover 3, they're going to play match or man coverage to that single receiver side. Guy over there, like Terry McLaurin, like Jahan, a guy that you think can win those consistently. They had AJ Green and Hopkins, obviously, just ripping by people. And they found a ton of explosive plays. And when you watch LSU, there's a lot of similarities there in terms of that deep ball accuracy, that touch to layer it in over the defender and give your guy a shot in the right position. So I think that's a great point. In addition to the quarterback running stuff, in addition to the RPO stuff, in addition to some of the play action pass stuff, that deep shot aggressiveness is something that I think you see in the air raid all the time. And you see it in Kliff's offenses, especially the last time he was calling plays at the NFL level.
So the card has been sent in. Jaden Daniels, that is our pick in mock draft 1.0. All right, we'll now watch Drake May goes 3, Marvin Harrison 4th. If you want to pause at any point, Roma Dunse. I set this on slow so we could kind of go through it. Malik Neighbors. I'll stop it for sure at 10, but if anybody sooner. Cooper DeJean, the corner out of Iowa, 7. Nate Wiggins, corner out of Clemson, 8 to Atlanta. Olu Fashanu, 9 to Chicago. And then the Jets take Joe Alt. Where we are through 10 picks, Logan. Anything super of note there?
Yeah, I don't think Cooper DeJean goes that high. I think Cooper DeJean's an excellent football player. I think he's so fun to watch. He returns punts. He's got great ball skills. He's got great instincts for coverage. I think the combine's going to be big for him. His film's awesome. Like, his film's amazing. But is he a safety? Is he a nickel? Is he kind of that hybrid Buffalo nickel linebacker? Because in college, he plays all of them, and he's good at all of them. He plays outside corner. But, like, what is his role? And, again, that lack of elite athleticism makes me a little bit nervous. And I think athleticism is a wrong thing to say, because he is a tremendous athlete. Like, his coordination's off the charts. But, does he run a 4.5 or does it affect his draft stock? So I don't know if he'll go that high. Also, Joe Alt going after Olu Fashanu, little surprising. I feel like Joe Alt's a lock. But I think the other picks in that range are pretty spot on. They feel go there. Obviously, no. Did Brock Bowers go in the top 10? I forget.
No, we don't have Bowers yet. So that's the thing is, like, you get a positional run on receivers, Harrison, Adunze, Neighbors, then corners, DeJean, Wiggins, and all of a sudden you're looking at a Brock Bowers outside the top 10. Like, one of these guys is going to fall. You can't have 12 top 10 players. That's how it works.
And I think the other thing about the storyline there is only 2 defensive players in the top 10. I think that's how it's probably going to go. I think the receivers in this class are awesome. So I think you're going to see a lot of them go early, a lot of them and often. So I think that feels very, very realistic, because honestly, that's probably the best position group in the draft class this year.
Yeah, for sure. And there's going to be more to come. All right, let's get play. Resume draft. Vikings on the clock at 11. They'll take Brock Bowers.
There he goes.
12, Bo Nix, QB4 off the board. Dallas Turner to the Raiders. By the way, Nix to the Broncos. Talisi Fuaga to the Saints. Jerzon Newton to the Colts. Terrion Arnold to the Seahawks. Latu, your guy, UCLA to Jacksonville. J.C. Latham, the tackle out of Alabama to Cincinnati. and then Jared Verse, edge out of Florida State, to the Rams, and then Kenyon Mitchell, the corner out of Toledo, to the Steelers. So in those 10 picks, Logan, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Bo Nix going 12. I understand that that's kind of the hot thing right now. Is it AJ McCarthy going there? Is it Bo Nix? It'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out. Obviously, they're looking for a quarterback. They're looking for a young guy, and people are pretty polarized on Bo Nix. I was pleasantly surprised by his film. People are pretty polarized on AJ McCarthy. His film, like obviously the athlete, the physical ability is there. The consistency is hard to find because he's only thrown the ball like 150 times in college football, so not a lot of throws
Right.
to kind of get your evaluation, but the athlete, the tools are there. But again, anytime you've got kind of these really polarizing opinions on a guy, 12 just seems way too high. And I think you were telling me in your first mock draft that you did, AJ McCarthy's there in the second round, right?
Yeah,
and
JJ McCarthy 50.
JJ,
I
yeah.
think in when I did that, the one where Caleb Williams fell to second. So crazy.
Yeah. So that's kind of the story. Anytime a quarterback goes, that's surprising. Obviously, Talisi Fuaga is one of my favorite offensive linemen in the class. Not surprising. I think Dallas Turner is interesting. He's such an interesting prospect because he's immensely physically gifted. He just moves kind of flourish, but like not always has the best plan. And so like it's totally a projection. So I would probably take Latu or Jared Verse above him. But again, that is not surprising to me that a team would fall in love with his ability. And obviously the corners, Quinyon Mitchell and Arnold, I think are really exceptional football players. Quinyon Mitchell was the standout at the Senior Bowl. And I'm surprised that, a guy that was maybe a second round player now going top 20, strong Senior Bowl with strong college tape at a smaller level. That's what that'll do for you. So
off the top of your head, is there anyone on the board right now where you're like, I would give up capital to go back into the first round and get him, knowing that, kind of what's coming in these next 12 picks?
So me, Craig, and we've done a lot of shows together, done a lot of draft talk together. I'm not a big fan of giving up capital for a guy evaluation on him. So a guy that I really like is Darius Robinson. I love his film. I loved him at the Senior Bowl. Like I've talked about him glowingly at every facet, but I'm not going to overvalue on him. There's other good football players and I want to make sure I can get 2 good football players instead of 1 good football player, right?
I agree.
That's ultimately my thought. So we'll see it through a specific situation, like obviously for quarterback, let's say we traded out of that top spot, for example, and we took a receiver, an offensive lineman, and there was a Bo Nix or a Penix or a JJ McCarthy, then I'd consider trading back in.
Yeah, that's the thing that I would say. If you have a quarterback that you love, and especially if you trade it out sooner and you pick up a little extra capital, that's buying you, you're playing chess. You're thinking 1 or 2 moves ahead here, where like you trade back accrue capital that you might use some of to trade back up later because that 5th-year option on a quarterback is so valuable. / do you make sure you get your guy at the end of the first round? All right. 100%. So with that, let's go 12 picks. Let's finish out this first round, and then we'll get into the second and the commander. So the Dolphins on the clock at 21. They take Marius Mims, tackle out of Georgia. Kool-Aid McKinstry, all-name team, cornerback, Alabama to the Eagles. Jackson Powers Johnson, center out of Oregon to the Texans. Troy Franklin, receiver out of Oregon to the Cowboys. Your guy Tyler Guyton, tackle out of Oklahoma to the Packers. Brian Thomas Jr., receiver, LSU to the Bucks. Braylon Trice, edge, Washington to Arizona. Ennis Rakestraw Jr., who is the cornerback out of Missouri to Buffalo. Kamari Lassiter, corner out of Georgia, well-liked by a lot of folks. He is going to the Lions. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia, to the Ravens. So a couple of Georgia guys. But Jordan Morgan and then Byron Murphy, the defensive lineman out of Texas, they go the last 2. So, Logan, real quick, let's pick a guy or 2 that you want to talk about, and I'm going to reload this draft, and we'll get to the second round.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the tackles going there, I think this is what it's going to look like, and they're going to be the case, with the Pro Bowl, with the Senior Bowl that he had, is going to go probably first round, right? The thing I love about that draft is that there's some good football players still on the board, like Ladd McConkey going to Baltimore. I think he's an excellent receiver, slot receiver, going to be an excellent pro. But that means that an edge, a tackle gets pushed to the Commanders. So when you see picks like that, Morgan going to San Francisco, I think is a really interesting pick because he's probably a guard, right? Would he add value to Washington potentially? But I think he's a better fit for that scheme there in San Fran. So again, that pushes players that again I think are better fits here in Washington to us, and I think that's pretty exciting. So obviously, lots of things there in that last 12 that shape the first 2 picks of the second round for the Washington Commanders.
All right, that was Mock Draft 1.0 from me and Logan. If you want to see what happened next, aka pick 36, pick 40 in that mock draft, you can check it out in the Take Command feed on YouTube at 1067 The Fan, or of course, Take Command wherever you get your podcast. While you're there, go and subscribe to our show, the Hoffman Show podcast. You miss anything, like our interview in hour 1 with Field Yates, it's already up right now. Coming up next here on the Team 980, we will do our first edition of the season of NBA tier rankings, same 4 tiers as we use for the NFL, for the NBA. That's next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Here on this Thursday, a Thursday at 5:30 during NFL season, Anthony, meant we would do our NFL tier rankings. Well, now that we don't have to do that anymore, or we don't have to, we can't do that anymore, I think perhaps we should switch it up. I think we should show a little bit of our versatility, if you will.
And what do you mean by versatility?
Well, we're not just football guys, Ant.
Okay.
We've been known to talk a little hoop every now and again.
Yeah.
So why don't we do the same exact exercise with the NBA that we used to do with the NFL?
Say it ain't so, Craig.
I say it is so. Now, one thing we do have to get straightened out, I just realized, is the music situation. Do we have a go-to? I mean, the obvious answer would be Round Ball Rock, but I think we might run into some copyright issues there. That is a heavily protected song. So, I'll tell you what. On my to-do list, before we do this again next time, remind me that we need a song for this.
Yes, sir.
Something that says power rankings. But we don't do power rankings, but the song should say relatively power rankings. The reason we don't do power rankings is because it's too hard to just go 1 through 30 and be like, what is this team better than this team better than that team? I know a lot of people do it, but I think it's a better bet to look at these teams and say, who belongs in the same neighborhood? What tier do these teams belong in? So our categories, and Anthony, I feel like I'm missing one. Interesting, but not quite good enough. Where prime contenders is like the top of the league. These are your obvious title contenders. The if they were to wind up in the NBA Finals, done. Got it. Oh, that's right. Our middle tier, that's the one I couldn't think of. Or our next highest tier is what we call puncher's chance. So, not a favorite. If they lose in the first round, second round of the NBA playoffs, not very surprised. But there is a path. And I think there's two very obvious people. There are two teams that wind up there. Then there's interesting, but not quite good enough, which is exactly what it sounds like. Like, these teams aren't the worst in the league, but they're not winning the title. And then there is no chance. Or as Anthony has put it, no chance in heck for these teams. We can go ahead and put Washington Wizards. Sorry. We will get to Deni Avdija's night in just a little bit.
The Wizards there before the Pistons?
I mean, it's the local team. That's what that had to do.
Okay, that's
they equally. You want to feel better? Detroit
Thank you.
Pistons. Okay, so we can do this one of two ways, Anthony. We can either go through the East and then go through the West, or we can just go through the league standings kind of in the same way we did the NFL. I actually kind of think doing it by conference is going to be more interesting.
I agree.
All right, let's knock out the East first.
Okay.
How many prime contenders realistically are in the Eastern Conference?
I mean, are we including Joel Embiid? Are we considering him?
I would think we have to consider him.
6 to 8 weeks? It's a long time.
It is, but if he's back for the playoffs, they can beat anybody.
Yeah.
Big if. And there's part of me that goes, like, if he comes back and he's healthy, like the fact that he's gotten 8 weeks, it's not 8 weeks off, but like, I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, I don't know, maybe some time where he hasn't been playing and accumulating hits and knocks and the rest of his body is resting is not the worst thing that's ever happened to him for him finally surviving a playoff run. The obvious, Boston's obvious. Boston Celtics are a real legitimate contender.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think Milwaukee, who's having the weirdest season in recent NBA memory, is a legitimate contender?
I mean, I think Doc is going to eventually figure it out. I can't count on Giannis and Dame.
That's where I'm at. I think Milwaukee has to go here.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they have a walking top 5 offense that they haven't even fully unlocked yet. Like, I think they could probably run some more pick and rolls and, who knows, buyout market. Can they get one more shooter or something, But at the end of the day, Doc's there to fix the defense, and we'll see how that goes. It might take a little bit of time, but They still do have a formula from a couple years ago they can kind of go back on. Are they missing Drew Holiday? Absolutely. Are they also benefiting from Dame Lillard? Yes. So I would say Milwaukee, you just can't bet against them. They have to be in that discussion. And they've proven it, by the way, because they've smashed some teams, even if they're having a weird year and nobody seems happy. Like the vibes are off. They don't pass the vibe test, which is important to me. But I do think that's in part because there's been so much influx and there's a little bit of damage to undo. Then there's Philadelphia. I think for right now, Philadelphia goes in puncher's chance. And I don't know how long it's going to be until they get out of puncher's chance. Because realistically, until we know that Embiid's good to go, they can't be a prime contender. But if JoJo is good, I do think it's worth pointing out that, like, you know, they're still in that top 6. Maxi's having a career year. Maxi, by the way, not scared of anyone. That dude is such a freaking gamer. And they're playing, like, decent ball as of late. They are – oh, I got my camera in the way. Actually, no, sorry. They were playing decent ball in the immediate aftermath of JoJo's injury. Now they're 3-7 in their last 10, so apologies on that. But they, you know, Tyrese Maxey's been great for them. They make the move for Buddy Hield at the deadline. Like, I think that team is well built. It's just a matter of will they be able to put it together this year.
Yeah, I agree. Puncher chance, I like the Sixers there. And I mean, I think they got to get Joel Embiid back in order for them to, you know, really be a prime contender. He was again playing MVP level basketball, averaging career highs across the board.
I mean,
so
do you realize just how good? And maybe you knew this stat, Anthony, but maybe a lot of people listening didn't. You know the season that Wilt averaged 50 a game?
Yeah.
So Wilt Chamberlain one time played 48.8 minutes a game, I think it was. So, like, he played every minute of every game, including some overtime games, basically for an entire season. In that season, he averaged 50 points a game. That will never be matched in the history of the league. This season, however, points per minute, Joel Embiid was ahead of that pace.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't play fourth quarters.
It's
They're
crazy.
Destroying teams.
Crazy. So if he can get back, they're going to vault up. And if he's playing at that level, but without, I think it's too much to ask to put them there right now. There's one other team that I feel like has to get mentioned. But I think they're going to go in puncher's chance.
Oh my gosh, you're about to do that to them?
Which team do you think that I'm about to say?
The Cleveland Cavaliers?
Not them. They're definitely in puncher's chance.
Oh.
Honestly, like, I don't
putting them in puncher's chance?
They're definitely not a prime contender. They've never made a conference finals, bro. You know how the NBA goes.
You're right.
You kind of got to go through the phases. But
the New York Knicks.
Are the New York Knicks good enough? Like, is Jalen Brunson good enough? Josh Hart, they've got championship medal from all those guys playing together in college.
Uh-huh.
They made a couple of moves at the deadline.
Yep.
The Anunoby trade's been pretty good to them so far. Do they belong on the same level as Boston and Milwaukee? Or are they more Cleveland, Philadelphia, etc.?
I mean, I think they're a puncher's chance, but I don't think we're giving the Cavaliers enough credit.
Ooh. Now talk to me about Cleveland.
I mean, just defensively, they've been as stout as like anybody. And I think getting Evan Mobley back has been a huge help on the offensive side of the ball, as well as defense. But I feel as though last year when they lost to the Knicks, it was more so they couldn't get anything done on the offensive side of the ball. They still did a solid job on the Knicks defensively, but like now we're seeing Jared Allen more involved. We're seeing Donovan Mitchell offensive game, and he talked about him possibly being in the MVP race, and it's because he's making the people around him better. Some of the role players that they got, Dean Wade and Sam Merrill and things of that nature. So I just think the growth from last season to this season has been very noticeable when I've watched the Cavs and Donovan Mitchell. So I think if we're going to put the Knicks in punch chance, I mean, I'm cool with putting the Cavs there, but they're number 2 in the East for a reason.
They are, in part because they're 9-1 in their last 10. And Mitchell's hard because last year the playoffs were not very good for him. But you think back to a couple of years ago when he dueled with Jamal Murray in that bubble series, like he's got some big playoff games on his resume. I just don't trust him.
Okay.
So I'm gonna stay puncher's chance for now. All right. Anybody else puncher's chance in the Eastern Conference, or are we about to get to a whole bunch of interesting but not good enough? I guess the defending champs probably deserve a mention here, and then we can quickly buzz through the rest of the conference. Do the Miami Heat have a shot?
With Jimmy Butler,
they always got a shot, don't they?
They really do. Like you gotta respect the Heat,
especially when they were 8-1 or the 8th seed last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Miami goes there. All right, interesting but not good enough. Indiana.
Yeah, I think you put the Pacers there because they can score with the best of like anybody, to be honest. But defensively, they are lacking. Oh my gosh.
Yes, they are. It is not good in the that side of the floor for them. Indiana, Orlando, Chicago. I don't even know how is Chicago 9th right now. They're so banged up. They're so hurt.
I mean, Kobe White he's having a breakout year. Zach LaVine, like, I think a lot of people was definitely leaning on him and hoping that he was going to be able to stay healthy and help the Bulls win some games. But in his absence, Kobe White has emerged, and he's part of the reason they are 9th in the East right now.
Yeah, he has been fantastic. Atlanta with Trae Young, I'm willing to put in there. Other than that, I kind of feel like everyone else is in no chance. Brooklyn, maybe. If you wanted to put them in interesting, fine. But
I think they just need to figure out what they're doing, to be honest. I think the Mikal Bridges as a number one experiment is coming to an end.
Very clearly not that. I'm going to put them in interesting right now because to put them in the same category as like the Wizards feels rude.
Okay.
But that's the last team. Toronto, Charlotte, Washington, Detroit.
No chance.
Yeah, no chance. All right, Western Conference next. Definitely some interesting things to talk about there because the entire Western Conference is on fire. How many prime contenders are actually over on that side of the NBA standings? We will discuss next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. All right, Eastern Conference NBA tier rankings in the books. We'll review as we go through here. Prime contenders, quickly. Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Bucks, Sixers, Cavs, Knicks, Heat as puncher's chance, Pacers, Magic, Hawks, Nets, interesting but not quite good enough, Wizards, Pistons, Raptors, Hornets, and no chance. All right, and here's how I want to do the Western Conference, especially because I think the standings are so fascinating to see some of these young teams up at the top. Let's just go down the standings. So starting at the top, the Minnesota Timberwolves are currently the 1 seed in the Western Conference. Yes, that is true. The Minnesota Timberwolves, if you're just now getting out of NFL season and are getting into the NBA, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the number 1 team in the Western Conference. Where do you think they belong on our tier rankings?
I think you got to put them in puncher's chance. I wouldn't label them a prime contender just yet. I don't think they have enough experience on the roster. I think Anthony Edwards is still having this coming out party. And a lot of people like to equate him to like an 84 Jordan where like he's still, finding himself, like he's going out there putting up crazy numbers, making it to the playoffs, just not really making it, to the conference finals and things of that nature. So I think they'll have a chance, but I wouldn't label them a prime contender just yet.
I would not either. And to me, it's pretty simple why. 1, very limited playoff experience. 2, some of their key guys have a history of disappearing or being less effective in the playoffs. Rudy Gobert gets run off the floor in the playoffs every single year. He might win his 6th Defensive Player of the Year trophy this year, and the voters love him because he's great in the regular season. But when you get into playoff basketball and you can isolate him and switch him in pick and rolls and do some of the things that teams do to him, that becomes less effective. And maybe this is the year it breaks through. Maybe this is the year that it's different. He and Karl Anthony Towns are obviously playing a lot better together, and Ant has gone to a whole new level. But I cannot trust them. They're puncher's chance to me. Oklahoma City Thunder are the 2 seed. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, very legitimate MVP candidate. Very good chance he could win that, especially as some of the other top candidates might struggle to meet. Like Joel Embiid's not going to meet the games played requirement, for instance. So depending on who is the survivor at the end of the year, a guy like Shai might wind up being the best candidate and a worthy one who is eligible. But to me, they kind of go in the same boat as Minnesota, where I love them. They're great, but they're so young and so inexperienced in the playoffs that it just feels like it's too soon for them. Then again, is this 2012 Oklahoma City all over again, where they wind up with Durant and Westbrook and Harden in the playoffs or in the finals? Maybe, but I think it's at least a year too early for them.
Yeah, I think they're just missing one more piece, to be honest. I think you got Shai, and he can handle the workload, but when it gets to the playoffs, you're going to need some help. Chad is there, but I still think they need another guy to, go along with Shai.
He's basically a rookie. Like, give Chet another year, give Shai another year, give the Jalen's Williams another year.
Killing too.
Yeah, They have 2. One of them is a stud, and that could be. And also, they've got all this capital. Do they make a move? Do they go this offseason and they all right, let's unload some draft picks and bring in a vet? And that could definitely be possible. All right. 3rd, currently in the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Clippers, to me, are a prime contender.
Prime contender, baby.
They have championship experience in Kawhi. It's a matter of whether or not he stays healthy, because Paul George has had a mixed bag in the playoffs. James Harden, we know, has had a bad playoff history, but he's never been this far down the roster in terms of importance. He can be overcome. And Russ embracing this role off the bench, I think, is tremendous, because we saw what kind of playoff performer he was last year. They've got good depth. They've got guys like Terrence Mann, Zubac, etc. It's just a well-put-together team that's playing at a super high level since they've kind of figured it out with Harden. And I think as long as they're healthy, I actually think they're the most dangerous team in the West. I know now I say that, and I'm like, still the Nuggets are the Nuggets, but I think when healthy, they're the most dangerous team in the West.
Yeah, I would agree. Prime contender, those guys. They say give them 10 games. It took them like 11 or 12, but they figured it out, and they are scary.
Denver Nuggets, prime contenders, done and done?
Yes.
Don't need to say anything else. They're defending champs. All right, this is where it gets fun.
Woo.
The Phoenix Suns, Anthony.
I'm going to go prime contender. They need Bradley Beal to stay healthy. I think when he's out there, they are a force to be reckoned with, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But if he's not there,
I'm just going to say
they're limited.
I don't trust them. I think they are a puncher's chance team because their chance comes from being healthy.
Yeah.
If they are healthy, because it's not just Brad. Book has had injury issues,
yep.
and Durant's injury history is extensive, especially at the end of the year. The chances that all three of them dudes are going to be healthy and clicking just feels like it's a Hail Mary, more so than the Clippers. And they have less room underneath them. Like the Clippers, as long as it's not Kawhi, they could lose Harden, lose Russ, or lose PG and still be nasty. They could still win a series, maybe against everyone but the Nuggets. But if one of those two dudes goes down for Phoenix, they could win a first-round series. I don't think they can make the conference finals.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I'm putting them in puncher's chance. The New Orleans Pelicans.
Interesting.
You don't even think they're puncher's chance.
I would think they're puncher's chance, but it's Zion, to be honest. Like he's the X factor, to be honest. And I don't really trust Zion, to be honest. If he goes out there and proves me wrong, stays healthy, continues to be the force that he's been, obviously, yes, I'm going to go with the Pelicans. They were number one last year before he went down, and they played well again this year. It's just I don't trust Zion, though.
All right, I'll move them down. I had them in puncher's chance, but I'm okay moving them down. I don't feel too strongly about it. All right, then we have the Dallas Mavericks.
I'm putting them in puncher's chance.
I do, too. If you have a top 5 player, you have a shot. And you have a playoff performer in Kyrie Irving, who is Kyrie Irving in the playoffs. Now they've got some stuff to figure out. They got to get this new cohesion going with PJ Washington in town, etc. But they got a shot. Sacramento Kings are the 8th seed. They're interesting, but not good enough to me. They were the playoff darlings last year, and they haven't been as good this year.
Yep.
All right. Then you get to the two that I think are the most interesting teams, and not just because they get talked about on ESPN nonstop, but they are legitimately, like, there's a reason beyond the star power. The Lakers and the Warriors.
Always got a puncher's chance, both of them.
That's you and I are on the exact same page. I think by definition, those two teams, who by the way are both 7-3 in their last 10 games, they have Steph and LeBron. When you get in the playoffs and you have Steph and LeBron, the Lakers just won the in-season tournament, and I know it's different, but like it shows that when it's time, he can still get there. AD, he can still get there. The Warriors are all of a sudden playing better. Draymond looks like a new person. The Kuminga Wiggins lineup doesn't look like a disaster like it did the first 40 games of the season. Kuminga's coming on strong.
Yep.
I think they got a puncher's chance. And then the Jazz and the Rockets, I would say both interesting but not good enough.
Yeah, both of those.
And then Grizzlies, Blazers, Spurs. I mean, the Spurs are always interesting because of Wemby. Did you see the sequence he had the other night, by the way? I mean, I know this is every night with him. But he had, I know, right? He had chase down block, or I think he had like an assist, chase down block, then gets an offensive rebound.
Kicks it out.
Or no, doesn't kick it out. Gets an offensive rebound off of a shot that he created. So he kicks it out. Dude misses it. He grabs the offensive rebound, winds up at the three-point line, in between the legs, step back three.
Yeah, I did see that. Yes.
Like, what the hell is that?
It's crazy.
It's crazy. So they're always interesting. They're definitely not good enough, but by the rules of the game, they're going to go down into no chance. So that means Grizzlies, Blazers, Spurs, and no chance. And so it's a lot of puncher's chance teams. Only 4 prime contenders. That's different than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more just parity in the NBA. Mainly on the Western Conference, to be honest. Because it's just too many teams over there.
And that's the thing is, like, you look at a team even like Sacramento. If they're in the East, are they up in puncher's chance? Probably. But it's like, can they beat 2 of these other teams in puncher's chance and 1 prime contender? No.
In a series also.
Right, especially in a series setting. So, no. So, thus, down they go. All right, those are our NBA tier rankings. We'll revisit them throughout the rest of the spring. Of course, we're not going to do it next week because, 1, I won't be here, and 2, there's no games to be played because the All-Star break, but we will pick it back up when I return and the NBA returns in a couple of weeks. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, back to football, back to Ashburn, JP Finley joins us with his impressions of Kliff Kingsbury and Joe Whitt Jr. here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and of course streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Joining us now from Ashburn, it's JP Finley, NBC4 Sports, and of course host of B. Mitch and Finley over on 106.7 The Fan. JP, what up?
Hoff, you'll love this. I'm actually in 7-Eleven. The line's kind of long. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm just trying to get some water. I have a cough that I can't kick. I'm at the Ashburn 7-Eleven right off Waxpool Road.
Basically, you're home.
Yeah. Well, this is like a home away from home. I'm on the wrong side of the river. Give me 2 minutes, and I will be back.
Okay. All right, we can do that. So JP's gonna try to get checked out. We thought we were good. We gave him a little bit of time there to get checked out and not. So if you're wondering what JP is still doing in Ashburn, as you know, he's obviously a Maryland guy, then it's because there was a press conference today. Kliff Kingsbury was introduced as head coach, or sorry, not as head coach. That would have been really weird. Surprise! No, introduced his offensive coordinator. Joe Whitt Jr. Introduced his defensive coordinator. The Commanders, by the way, also announced their staff this morning. Couple of interesting names. One of the, I don't know how consequential this one is. This is a much more inside the building thing, but I thought it was interesting to see a quote come up. But Sarah Hogan is going to be the chief of staff, and she was in Atlanta. Dan Quinn poached her. And she was someone that Raheem Morris was asked about a couple of weeks ago and gave glowing reviews and was very excited to work with. And Dan Quinn was like, nah, she's coming with us up here. So a chief of staff can do a lot of different things, but kind of the organizational side of it. But I thought that was an interesting one. More on the football side of it versus the administration. David Blau, one of the interesting names that comes out today. He was most recently a backup quarterback in the league. You might remember him from multiple editions of Hard Knocks. He was on with the Lions. He was on with the Arizona Cardinals with Kliff a couple years ago. Kliff actually joked today that he had been, or when they brought him in mid-season in Arizona in 2021, Kliff said that Blau knew the offense better than him within 2 weeks. That's how smart the guy is. So great other voice to have in the room. Someone who's been, had to learn offenses. I always think that's a skill, and the ability to pass on that knowledge is really nice to have in a room. So someone who played in the league and someone who played in the league recently, that is a great skill set to have. And then obviously great experience on the defensive side all the way down. All right, JP, have we cleared the line at 7-Eleven? Are we good to go?
Dude, I am truly, really sorry about that. In my defense, I told Ant that I needed a second, and he put me on hold. I didn't know that meant I was, potted up on hold. Luckily, I had a headphone in when you counted me in. It was an experience. Sorry about that.
No, all good. I think you did a very good job. Also, that might have been my fault because Anthony told me you needed 2 minutes. I just thought it had been 2 minutes, and I'm notoriously terrible at math. So honestly, that might be on me. And I'm you know what? I'm just gonna own it. My name's on the show. That's on me.
How about this? I got nothing but time now. I'll stay on through a commercial break if you need. No problem.
All right. Well, I tell you what, we'll just do the old 15-minute double break bit probably because there's plenty to talk about. So I think that'll be the plan. You got nothing but time. We got nothing but questions. Let's start off with this. I think a lot of people went into today most excited to hear from Kliff because with DQ's defensive experience, people are kind of more interested in that other side of the ball, that OC hire, the number 2 pick, yada, yada. And then Joe Whitt Jr. seemed to steal the show. What was it like in the room as those two men spoke today? The energy, any memorable quotes? As you walk out of the room and go back to the media annex afterwards, what's immediately sticking in your head is the most important thing that happened today?
I think you nailed it on kind of the tone of the day. Everybody was ready to be wowed by Kingsbury talking quarterbacks and offensive systems and what is this thing going to look like. And I don't fault him for it at all. Kliff's been a head coach in the league for 4 seasons. He's done these things so many times that I can't imagine he was too excited to talk to us today. It was more of a perfunctory measure than it was something that he was looking forward to. Whereas for Joe Whitt, he kind of came right out of the gate and was saying that he feels he had been ready for this for a long time. And the thing that's really seem to like mesh well and have a shared vision. But honestly, Craig, the thing that stood out to me most with Whitt was kind of a story he told where he explained that he's dyslexic, and because of that, he realizes that like he learns differently, and that in turn he has to maybe coach different players differently, and he has to meet them where they are, was what he said. And I just found that really refreshing from a previous regime that was pretty straightforward, like this is how we do it, figure out how we do it. And I don't know, I appreciated, I suppose that's not vulnerability, it's just opening up perhaps. And I thought it was a really telling moment of how somebody can connect with players and find them in their own space to make them better and to make the unit more cohesive.
No, I 100% agree that was the most important thing that was said today at that press conference, because there's an understanding, and it was kind of followed up with that quote. I'm going to paraphrase here, but basically, like, if a player's not learning, that's not the player's fault. That's on us as coaches. And the idea that you can't just be like, this is the information, you're a pro, if you're not on board, we'll replace you, because that's how you waste talent in this league. And the fact that he did mention he liked a guy like Forbes, and obviously he liked Quan as well coming out of the draft, that gives me a lot of hope for those guys. I'll tell you this, at the very least, we're going to know whether or not they were good football players at the NFL level, because these guys are going to give them a chance, where last year, I think we're all just kind of like, I don't know, they look like busts, at least for part of the year in Quan's case, but these guys are not very good at coaching, so maybe it's all on that side of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And think about what we all perceive to be really talented players on that defensive front that at times have shown that, and at other times it seemed fairly pedestrian. Like, how much of that has been previous scheme or a lack of talent development, and how much of it could still be the players? Maybe we'll find out. I think one important part of this exercise is also to remind ourselves, like, 4 years ago, plenty of people were excited about Jack Del Rio, and last year, plenty of people were excited about Eric Bieniemy. So, today is an introduction to a coach and perhaps some principles and some insight, but I thought Joe Whitt, the person, was really interesting. He told the story about, a lot of coaches like to stick around really late, but I don't do that. Like, to me, if you're sticking around late, it means you cheated yourself during the day. And I'd rather just go all out all day, and then when it's time to leave, it's time to leave. And I can appreciate that, because I do think on some level, like, some politics get involved, like, oh, the head coach's light's still on, so I got to just stay here until he goes home. And,
Yes.
I think we saw so much perception mattering in the last regime that didn't matter, that I'd like to see less of it. And honestly, I mean, even Kliff, I would say, neither of these guys seem to care about perception today.
No, I agree with that. And I will say, because I'm a gigantic nerd who's reading a book on sleep right now, and the effect that it has on the brain. Like, the grind culture of the NFL that's like, be in at 4 a.m., stay till 11 p.m., and sleep on your couch is a terrible way to exist as a human, especially in a job that involves a lot of problem solving and creativity. Your brain literally becomes incapable of doing it if you deprive yourself of sleep that much. So, like, that was another very refreshing thing to be like, no, we're not going to play these games. Like, I'm going to go see my family, and then I'm going to go to sleep, and then I'll show up for work and work really hard the next day. Again, am I a gigantic nerd who's read a book on sleep? Sure. Is that also how every human being's brain works? Yes. So that seems like an important thing. JP Finley is with us here on the Hoffman Show. One thing that I thought was interesting, both on Kliff's side and on Joe Whitt Jr.'s side, let's talk about it from Whitt's side first, and then we'll circle around and talk about the offense, is they both seem committed to almost nothing schematically. When they, Whitt, as DQ did, was like, 4-3, 3-4, doesn't matter to me. Like, is this team on the verge of switching fronts all of a sudden? And what would that mean for what they have? Or do you think this is just a bunch of lip service because they don't really know what they're going to do yet, and they're trying to keep the options as open as possible?
I didn't hear that as switching the base defense. For me, and I've kind of been shouting this for a while. Like, teams play so little base defense anyway that it's become more of like a talking point for fans and stuff than it is a reality.
True.
And I think his point was more like, man, everybody plays cover 2 or cover 3 or quarters or whatever it is. Like, there's always going to be variations, but it's not like we're going to reinvent the wheel with some sort of defensive alignment that will change everything. Was kind of my understanding of it. What I found really interesting was, and he said this early, was that, you know, he just led a staff meeting letting everybody know we're going to do things differently. Kind of, we expect violence and we expect super physicality. And that almost sounds like he's letting players know to expect that. And, that I find really interesting because I didn't think they were all that physical at the point of attack defensively. And I think they could have been. Curl was probably the best tackler, and then I think Kendall Fuller was decent in run support, but BSJ and certainly Forbes, that wasn't a real strength. Like, this dude knows his DBs, and it's going to be all over his DBs. And I think there's some level of, like, an immediate challenge to these guys. Like, this is going to have to look a lot different if you're going to be on the field for me.
JB Finley, of course, B. Mitch and Finley on 106.7 The Fan is with us. Is there anything else from Whitt's presser, schematically, attitudinally, coaching-wise, or anybody else on staff on that side of the ball before we flip it over to Kliff in the offense that you think is worth noting as we finally got the full staff announcement earlier today and then heard from Joe Whitt Jr. from the first time?
I'm excited to see Ken Norton. I also think, just anecdotally, Joe Whitt saying his favorite player ever is Sean Taylor, and then I was told later that he has a framed Sean Taylor jersey at his house. Like, I just think that's kind of a cool, random, serendipitous, full circle moment. I think there's a lot of people about Joe Whitt's age, that, especially if you played secondary, that Sean's your favorite player. But I just thought that was kind of neat. But beyond that, happy to go to Kliff and maybe more so what we didn't learn than did.
Yeah, so Kliff seems like he's just kind of getting a bunch of smart dudes in the building and then they're going to figure it out, which I don't know how he sold that in the interview process. Hey, what's your plan? I don't know. We'll just hire some guys and then we'll come up with one. Okay, cool. But that's kind of the impression I got out of it, which is both exciting because they can play to their personnel, but also terrifying because I would like a little bit of structure, I would think, to be in place when I hire an offensive coordinator. What did you make of the things that, again, I think you phrased that well, the things that we learned and the things that we didn't?
I highly doubt he told us the same stuff he told Dan Quinn.
That is probably also a good point.
I think because I can understand why he would be, but I thought he was fairly disinterested today, especially in divulging any sort of information. Or I don't think he wanted to talk Arizona. I don't think he wanted to talk Kyler. I don't think he wanted to talk how he landed here instead of the Raiders. Like, it seemed to me that he wanted to avoid anything that would create a headline on ProFootballTalk.com. And I can kind of understand that for him. But perhaps I'd say the thing that I have thought this throughout the process, and I continue to think it today after that presser. I think it's overly simplistic to say, well, Kliff coached Caleb at USC. Of course, they're going to make a big play to go get him. I think that that is just far too linear of an approach. And the fact that he mentioned a guy like Lamar today in what you want in a quarterback, to me, opens that up a lot broader. And I'm kind of pushed back against that. Now, if Caleb gets to number 2, I think it changes. But, I don't think, they hired Kingsbury, they're going to trade up to number 1 to get Caleb. And I feel better in that today.
I've been with you on that for a while now. Although it was wacky. I don't know if you saw that Logan and I did our first Take Command mock draft the other day, and we used PFF's mock draft simulator. And I wound up having to hit the start button 5 times, and I think 3 of the 5 were Drake May as number 1. And I was like, well, if that happens, That'd be cool, but
I mean,
seems unlikely.
We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out a lot more over the next couple of weeks when we head to Indy, but I definitely feel like if Chicago plays their cards right, either they or someone else is taking Caleb at 1. What did you make of Kliff saying that he would not call what the offense is going to be, whatever it is going to be, air raid anymore?
I think that's actually accurate, and if anybody's going to understand what that air raid truly was, or perhaps still is, would be Kingsbury, who played at it and then coached it. I mean, that real air raid stuff that Mike Leach was running, when you had all those dudes at Texas Tech throwing for like 6,000 yards and then being fifth-round picks. I mean, go back and look at some of those names. We did this on the podcast the other day. Obviously, everybody remembers that catch Michael Crabtree made against Texas, right?
Yep.
And that just inbound. Do you remember who the quarterback on that team was?
That wasn't Kliff, was it? That was after Kliff, right?
Correct. That was a dude you've never heard of that didn't make a lick of difference.
Was that Graham Harrell?
That was Harrell, yes, sir.
Hell yeah. Don't tell me I don't know my old 2000, whatever year that was, Texas Tech quarterbacks.
Right. But that air raid system at that point in time was just beating defenses. And I legitimately never thought Kliff was trying to do that now. And I think especially when you bring in Anthony Lynn, I think legitimate criticism. I think I heard you and Logan talk about at one point, but we've heard in this cycle with Kingsbury is like, what does the run game look like? Does it match with the pass game? Does it create play action? And I don't know that you go back to Arizona, you could say a lot of that does. And I think bringing Lynn in will ideally help in that capacity. And I think the other part is the true air raid stuff. If you go back and watch Graham Harrell and all those types of dudes, none of them were mobile. It wasn't really until Mahomes did they have somebody that could run. And it was like a pocket, 3-step, 5-step fire kind of, you know what I mean? Like, the fact that Kingsbury's talking about mobility and guys that can make plays with their feet is also a bit of a departure from the true air raid system.
No, that is definitely true. But there's also, I was talking about this earlier in the show, the spacing, like the space reading element of it, where you're not necessarily as concerned with like what coverage are they in, but it's like where is the space. That's actually very beneficial in the modern NFL because we have all these zone match, like amoeba-ish defenses that it's impossible unless you know the call to know what the original thing was. Like we watch film all the time and we're just like, what coverage is that? I don't know. There's just dudes everywhere. And if that's the case, then some of that stuff making it into the new offense is very helpful. But I think, as you said, marrying it with Anthony Lynn, Bobby Johnson, et cetera, and what they bring is very helpful. Your co-host on Beltway Football Pod, Mitch Tischler, asked about Bobby Johnson, who is, I think, everyone's biggest concern considering the last couple of years in New York. What did you make of Kliff's answer about the Commanders' new O-line coach?
Kind of what I expected there, and I think I don't know enough. I just don't know enough about that situation. I kind of need to dig into it for my own understanding. But the Giants had a ton of injuries along the offensive line. I don't know that they developed and had good backups and all that, but I do think some of this year's trouble was, I mean, just how beat up they were. I mean, if you look at the combinations and the amount of players, or think about just Justin Pugh, who I know we both talked to at the Super Bowl. And the fact that he was signed to the practice squad on a Thursday, and what would that be, 9 days later was playing left tackle in a nationally televised night game. Like, they clearly had some trouble up there. I don't know. It's not, of all the hires, it's the one that probably makes the least amount of sense. But they also obviously have their process that they stuck with that they feel quite good about.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And you talked about the mobility stuff that Kliff mentioned, and obviously Johnson, the experience the last couple of years with Daniel Jones and getting him going. So that seems like the connective tissue to me.
Did he mention Josh Allen prior to that? Or
yeah, he did.
Somewhere?
He did.
Yeah, okay.
So that connective tissue of the mobile quarterback, I think, is definitely a huge reason why Bobby Johnson gets the nod. We'll see how it all comes together. JP Finley talking about it on your televisions on NBC4, in your ears on 106.7 The Fan and the Beltway Football Pod. JP, safe travels back to your side of the river, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
All right, JP Finley with us here on the Hoffman Show. B. Mitch and Finley, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. daily on 106.7 The Fan, which you can also listen to, like you can listen to us, and some of you are right now, on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, yesterday I said that we need to chill out on some of the Deni Avdija talk. And then Deni Avdija went out and scored 43 points last night. Let's discuss next. right now is we also, of course, are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Let's talk a little hoops, shall we, Anthony? I will admit I was not watching initially live last night as Deni Avdija lost his mind in New Orleans. But after our discussion on the show with Linnell yesterday, all of a sudden I get a text from Linnell going, Deni. And then I was like, well, I better see what's going on. And all of a sudden, Deni Avdija, who, if you were not listening at 5:30 yesterday or have not checked out our Wizards Talk segment on the podcast or on YouTube, I said, look, he's playing a lot better. And that's very exciting and very, very encouraging. However, realistically, Deni Avdija is not a top 3 player on a championship team. He's just not that guy. He's playing better. It's exciting. He's also averaging 13 points per game this season. Like, let's cool our jets a little bit. On a championship team, he's somewhere between the 4th and 7th starter. Optimally, that like 6th man coming off the bench, maybe playing top 5 minutes on the team. But his role is like defensive wing, can score for you in a pinch, but not a guy you're relying on in any kind of way for consistent point production. Good day for me to say that when he then goes out and drops career high 43 points, Anthony, last night. Made me look like a real doofus. Or did he?
I mean, first of all, Linnell didn't only text you. He texted me as well. And I was so confused, like, what he was even talking about. But, yeah, Deni going out there, to be honest, I just think it was a good day for the Washington Wizards as a whole. Definitely a career night, and I don't want to take that away from Deni. But I think, as you pointed out, that he's just, playing well this season. Like, I think for the future, as we look towards the future anyway, we can, confidently say we can see Deni playing a pivotal role as a role player in the, foreseeable future.
The thing is, Deni Avdija was a 9th pick in the draft. He wasn't a top 5 pick. And if you get a 3rd, and here, I will mea culpa. Anthony, I'm actually willing to adjust my opinion.
Okay.
After seeing Deni Avdija last night,
yep,
I think in the absolute right scenario, he could potentially be the 3rd best player on a championship team. Like, if he's got the best player in the league as his number 1 guy and a top 10 guy as number 2, and by the way, the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th best players are not that much different than he is, but he's definitively the 3rd, where he's averaging 18 points and 8 boards a night. Like, okay, fine. I can, at 23 years old, I'm willing to say that is beneath his ceiling, or that is his ceiling, right? I'm not willing to go any higher, but that is his ceiling. Okay, fine. Maybe we see that now. But that's really not that different than what I said yesterday. Being one of those top 2 guys is a very different story. And I think where I get sideways is there's a lot of Wizards fans that are like, we can't put a ceiling on these guys. We have to give them more shots, more opportunities, more. And to use the analogy that I used yesterday with Linnell, like, you can't bake a cake at 10 minutes at 800 degrees and expect to get the same recipe or the same results when the recipe calls for 400 at 20 minutes. You don't get to just give them more and get better results and think that's going to work. And that, like, yes, you do want to give some of these younger guys more opportunities. And part of the reason Deni gets this opportunity last night is Kuz is out. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, he got more opportunities and he made the most of it. But, like, let's also be realistic about what Deni Avdija did last night. Took 10 threes. And a lot of those were like, or not a lot, but there was like a few of those that are like step back, late clock threes. And he made them. Like, I'm not trying to take away from Deni Avdija. That's phenomenal. The fact that he even has that in his game as a possibility is thrilling. That's super exciting. But we don't want Deni Avdija taking step-back threes because I don't want almost anyone taking step-back threes. I want Dame taking step-back threes. I want Harden taking step-back threes. I want Steph taking step-back threes. And I don't know if there's anybody else. Trae Young can take them. I don't know if there's anybody else in the league I want taking those on a regular basis. Now, if you get in a late clock situation and the ball's in your hands, great. But how many times has Deni had the ball late clock this year and fallen down? And I'm not saying that, again, to be like mean or be like, but he's having a great couple of weeks. And by the way, these great couple of weeks are coinciding with Brian Keefe taking over. This clearly was a great move by this front office. We're already seeing dividends of the results of these young guys getting different and better opportunities and taking advantage of it. But I just want people to like, I will say a lot of Wizards fans, when I tweeted like some of y'all need to chill out, had great responses. We were all having good fun. It's like, it's a crap season. Let us have our fun. And I'm not trying to rain on your parade. The only people I'm trying to simmer down is the people that are like, well, when John Wall was 23, he had a breakout game like this, and then he was John Wall. Deni Avdija ain't going to beat John Wall. If that's you, then yeah, you don't get to have any fun anymore, and you don't get to talk about basketball anymore. You need to go sit in the corner and think about what you said. But if you're just having fun with it in the middle of an otherwise crap season, have all the fun you want. It is what it is. And if that involves making fun of me for being a wet blanket, I'm willing to take that because I'm right here with you in the middle of this crap loss season.
Deni Avdija goes out and he's John Wall.
Because he had one 40-point game.
And look,
in the season where more points are being scored than any in NBA history.
There's hope for the season. I mean, there's hope for this team then.
Yeah. Well, because that's becomes the discussion, right? Like the more serious turn on this is people think Bilal is definitely one of the building blocks, and I think they are correct. I think Koulibaly has been a revelation. Exactly where he is on that 1 through 3 pecking order, still TBD. I think most likely 3, possibly 2. I have a hard time seeing 1, but he's 19. Who the hell knows? He is someone that if you're like, don't put a ceiling on him, I go, okay. Because for all I know, he could grow another 3 inches. Like that's the nature of him being 19 years old, right? So you have that part of it, right? Then the question is, do you have any of your other building blocks, or are the guys that are here now mostly trade assets to acquire those building blocks or supplementary pieces? And that's where I think people are getting out over their skis. They see 2 good weeks from Deni Avdija and go, oh, he can score 25 a night over this stretch. Like maybe he's a 20-point guy. He's one of the building blocks. And I would tell you he's doing it on a 9-win team at the All-Star break. If there are better players, he's not getting these opportunities, and he's not going to put up these numbers. This is why I think the best version of Deni Avdija from a team standpoint, like individual statistics, sure. Could he average 20 in a season? Maybe. Team's not going to be very good, but maybe. But on the team side of it, I think Deni Avdija playing 30 minutes a night, averaging 16 points, 18 points, 7, 8, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Like, that's a tremendously useful basketball player. That's not me saying, like, Deni Avdija stinks. To be very clear, I understand how rare and good and helpful that basketball player is in the NBA. I think that's the best version of Deni. I don't want to say those guys are a dime a dozen because they're not. It's rarer than that. But I don't know that is like a tentpole building block player. I think it's just below that. So I guess I'm trying to help protect you from becoming too emotionally attached to Deni Avdija when I know he's 23, and it seems like, oh, well, the timeline thing, how can you talk about that? He's 23, still so young. But realistically, now he's ready to be that guy and be very helpful for a team, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years. And I don't know, or for the next 3 to 5 years in his prime. And I don't know that the Wizards are the Wizards will be ready in 3 years, not ready for the next 3 years, if that makes sense, which means they can probably get something good for him. And that's exciting. We like that. You know what else we like, Anthony?
What?
Jordan Poole took 10 threes last night, and he made 5 of them.
Yeah. I think the person that I've been most impressed with the last couple of weeks, Tyus Jones, man. The dude just simply dishes out assists, doesn't turn the rock over. And I'm interested to see, what his future looks like here because, again, they can re-sign him in the offseason. And I think he will be a good person, to keep in the organization just because of how productive he is when he has the ball in his hand. So Tyus Jones, yeah, he's been cooking. Another night, 14 points, 15 assists, coming off a night where he previously had 14 points and 16 assists. So I don't know. I'm loving what I'm seeing out of Tyus.
I'm just saying, Tyus, since he's been on the show, reverse effect of some other guys that have been on the show.
Yeah.
So we should do that math. We should see when we had Tyus on and see what his numbers are. I have to shoot the Wizards a note and be like, if Tyus ever starts slumping, you know where to send him.
Mm-hmm.
Do a little interview with the Hoffman Show. Bang, bang, bang. I didn't get a chance to say this with Linnell yesterday, but when it comes to Tyus, his value around a young team is so high. And I know, like, other teams, like, eventually, do you want to probably flip him? Yeah, I probably would. But to have, like, an adult in the room and on the floor to keep things organized and to make sure that everyone's practicing good habits because they're not taking wild shots and they don't have to take on too much responsibility, that's super helpful in the development of young players. And we've seen it. You know, Chris Paul was essential to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's rise in Oklahoma City. We've seen it before. And Tyus Jones is obviously not what Chris Paul was when CP3 was in OKC. CP3 was still an all-star. Tyus is not that. But that role is so important, and Dawkins and Winger have seen that up close, which is why I'm actually not that surprised that they kept him, even though the contract is expiring and that they're interested in keeping him. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, we wrap up the show with real things real people said into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 90. All the Monday following, and then I'm off to Indianapolis for the NFL Combine that Tuesday and Wednesday before flying back on Thursday. We'll have a ton of content from you or for you from Indianapolis. Always great to get a bunch of great sit-downs. I'm sure like some of the PFF guys will swing by. You know, we had Field Yates on earlier today. We'll check back in with him. If you missed our interview with Field, make sure you check out the podcast, the Hoffman Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, and anywhere else you get your pods. Logan and I always record live in Indy, which is really fun. Last year we did a crossover episode with my fitness podcast because obviously the training for the Combine is a huge part of it. So maybe we'll do that again. So the Combine is such a great time and such a great content factory. So very excited to get there and do all of that. Beyond that, Anthony, have you talked to Doc at all, or / you know what you guys are going to be doing tomorrow on the show? This is the part where we preview tomorrow, or because we've been doing the show today, you haven't exactly gotten there yet.
Yeah, Doc actually texted me earlier in the show, and I told him I was on air, and I really haven't given it too much thought. But he has some guys that he's already contacted. So, yeah, we might get Chris Miles on though to preview NBA All-Star Weekend with Doc. That's about it right now.
Okay. I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes I get tagged on Twitter, for instance, because it's my show, and they're like, in for Craig Hoffman, and I'll have like 3 Hall of Famers on the show, and I'm like, oh right, you're Doc Walker.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you do this.
Yep.
The Doc Rolodex is deep, so we'll see who Doc has on, and of course, Doc, I'm sure will have thoughts. You know who I'm pretty sure Doc is going to just be fawning over tomorrow?
Who?
Joe Whitt Jr. That is
probably
a Doc Walker kind of coach.
Yeah.
Right there. I got to say, man, we had Quinn on last week, and I pushed him a little bit, not in like an antagonistic way, but he kind of gave what I would consider a good but standard coach answer about, we want to be physical, our play style, and hearing Joe, and I asked him, when we get to the Joe Whitt part of it, like, how do you actually get that done? Because every coach says these things, and half of them fail. And he's like, you emphasize, or you get what you emphasize. And so for us, over assignments, over everything else, we're going to emphasize physicality, strain, finish, explosiveness. And you hear Joe Whitt today talking about, obviously these two guys have worked together, so I'm not surprised it's the same language, but you want to talk about being on the same page. Like, we're going to arrive with bad intentions. The ball, I love his ball is life. We're going to need to pull the Ted Lasso, Danny Rojas ball is life clip and just have that every time the Commanders get a turnover, we're going to hit the ball is life button. I think that would be a fun bit, and I think we're going to be able to hit that a lot because this is the stuff they preach. They preach that physicality, and it oozes out of Joe Whitt Jr. in a way that if you're a player, and you can imagine being in a meeting with that guy, and it's like, I know it's important to you. If I go rock somebody and I'm a linebacker, coming down to fit a run, and even if I fit the wrong gap, but I do it physically, I'm probably going to get points, which not that you're looking to do the wrong gap, but if you make a mistake, make it quickly. And if you're going to play fast and play violently and let the rest take care of itself. Because offensively, you can get messed up. Of course, beautiful execution, X's and O's. You want to see it all come together. Oh, look at the angles. That stuff's all great. If you are a linebacker and you can't get to your gap, but you blow up a guard somewhere else, you might have opened up something else to make a play. And of course, assignment discipline is the most important thing. I don't want to sound like I'm talking about, or is incredibly important. I'm not trying to sound like someone who's talking out both sides of his mouth, because I think if you hear me analyze football, it tends to be very analytical and assignment based, and this is what happened, this is what went wrong, or this is what went right, this is why this worked, we put this defender in conflict, yada yada yada. But there is something to sometimes you just line up and kick the ass of the person in front of you. It is a sport where that is a thing, and there are times where you have it drawn up perfectly, and one dude wrecks your day. And that's what they want to design, is the potential for, on any given play, one of 11 dudes to make a play and wreck your day because of how physical they are. And that is going to start with Dan Quinn, and it is going to flow through Joe Whitt, and it is going to go down through that entire defensive staff. And I think they want to, bring that attitude offensively too, which is why it was nice to hear Kliff talk about running the football, being balanced, and establishing the line of scrimmage. Even though he's going to still bring, even if he's not calling it air raid, some air raid components to this offense. All right, Ant, let's do it. One final time for me this week. Real things real people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, more from the press conference today, including this one from Kliff Kingsbury. I actually didn't know this. Anthony Lynn, he and Kliff, you try to find the commonalities. There's not a lot there. It's like, why did they hire this guy? Clearly, it's the alma mater, silly.
Excited about Anthony. He's been a head coach, another Texas Tech Red Raider, which you can't have enough of those rocket scientists on the staff.
Kliff with the wry sense of humor. Also, Kliff Kingsbury has such a deep voice.
Yeah, he do, man.
I think Kliff and Kevin Sheehan need to do an interview.
You think Kevin's voice is deep?
Are you serious right now? Say Kevin interviewing Kliff like in studio where good microphones. I think we're talking blowing some speakers. The bass in that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Then
Yeah.
inflection. Okay, I can hear you then.
What do you? Hey, how'd you blow your speaker? You bump in some 808s back there? Like what? No, dude. I was listening to 980, and Kevin Sheehan interviewed Kliff Kingsbury, and their voices were just so deep that, wow.
Would you rather hear those two speak or the rooster?
What? Why'd you bring Russell in?
Because rooster's loud.
Oh yeah, that could also blow a speaker. All right, y'all have fun without me. Doc in tomorrow.